in the band, I was so focused on the details and getting everything to go that I didn't have a lot of really profound moments, because there's always the next thing to do. I do remember being, I think in the first year of the band, a volunteer crew of us used to actually take all the equipment into the stands that night. After rehearsal, after everyone put their instruments away, we would get all the equipment together and take it into the field, and that includes all the water, all the speakers, everything. And I actually really loved being on that field, just almost completely by myself, and just standing there in that beautiful stadium, and also doing the cleanup at the end of games. That was all volunteers who stayed after and cleaned all that up and got all that gear back. So one of the most beautiful moments, I think, was being, performing in the field that is filled with people, but then also being there when it's just completely and totally empty, and you can really appreciate that dichotomy between beautiful empty field and then this powerful football feeling. I will have to say that marching out that first day on September 11th in 2004 was a huge rush. Super adrenaline rush. It felt really good to perform. I don't think I knew all my music. I think later in the band, when I was able to actually perform a whole show and I memorized every single thing and I got everything right, that was the ultimate A+ in my book. That felt really good to finally get to the point where I could just do everything really well. Like I said, those first few years, it was always a struggle to get all the drill learned, to get all the music learned, to get everything together. It was always sort of chaos. And then through the band, I think even when I was a fourth year, there was still a lot of chaos. But then coming back as an alumni and getting to see the students who were first years when I was graduating, eventually take the reins and lead the band, and watching the band grow as an observer and understanding all the little things that had to get perfected to make it right. I think the aha moment, or the really meaningful moments, are actually watching the band now and just seeing how many students there are, how happy they are, how much they enjoy the game, how everything runs really fluidly, or a lot more fluidly than it used to. You get this grand appreciation. So it's watching the band in these past couple of years, when they've really just blown everyone away, that I think have been the most wonderful moments of having been involved in the C&B. I'll also have to say that being in the stands now and noticing the number of people who know the song lyrics, the people that know the moves to the dances, that have learned all of these old songs that have been totally forgotten, that are historical songs that were played in the early 20th century, that Mr. Pease and the other directors have actually dug up and brought out of the archives and brought back to life. Seeing the students know all of those songs, know all the moves, that's been really meaningful, because that, I think, one of the most difficult things for the early years of the band was fighting this horrible anti-football culture. We're very much a big football school band that plays and performs, even though there's some technical pieces, but in general it's a performance. It's not meant to be technical. But we didn't have that football culture at UVA, and seeing that develop and seeing how the band has really been the catalyst to get that to develop has been really powerful. Before the band, there was this pep band, and there was a lot of animosity when we first started, and so there was actually it was very hard to get that momentum turned around. It was very negative towards the band, and then to turn it around into something positive, and it's just been steamrolling forward. And to see that actually come to fruition these past couple of years has been really wonderful. It makes all the things that we were doing and all the time that we put into it at the beginning really worthwhile. Plus, I don't remember a lot of it because I was so sleep deprived. You tend not to make long-term memories when you're not sleeping. I enjoyed going to some of the away games that we took a small band to. Going to Georgia Tech was really nice. Seeing all the different stadiums I thought was really cool, because we have this beautiful stadium here that's sort of big and sprawling with the colonnade, and then to go to some of the stadiums that are tucked into the city, or like Florida State, which is just this freestanding, humongous structure. Seeing other universities was a lot of fun, and getting to see other cities. I didn't enjoy going to Maryland very much. It was a little scary. Remember, people would get in your face when we were leaving. I think we always lost as well. Going to Tech was nice, but people were sometimes rude at Tech, so that was a little hard. I thought we were reasonably gracious hosts when they came, at least from a standpoint of the community. I don't know if we were great hosts as a band, because we would have these band battles that would never go very well. Like I said, our band is a lot about showmanship and putting on a great performance, and the Tech drumline is a lot more about precision and technique. So having a battle of the drumlines, you know, showmanship and performance versus technique didn't always go very well. They were enjoyable, but there were some really negative moments when the first time we performed at Tech, we tried to actually perform with Tech. So we all went out on the field. That was a disaster. I'm not going to comment on why it might have been a disaster. Band day is always really fun, though. Having that many students on the field and being mentors was really fun. Seeing kids from your high school was really nice. Seeing your band director. It's a crazy day for us, a crazy week for us to host that many kids. But having those students there, giving them that opportunity, I think has been great for recruiting the band. I've recognized a lot of people coming eventually, but also great for the state to bring them to their state university. You know, UVA doesn't do a lot of those sort of open programs to bring kids to UVA to see them. So that's one of the great opportunities, I think. I really loved when we started doing like pop songs to make it silly, but like the songs from Kill Bill, I can't remember its name, that one was really fun. I actually liked doing the theme pieces, so when we did the Temptations music, or we would do sort of these pieces from the 70s that were thematically linked, that was really fun. There's some composer that really didn't like horn players, and so we wouldn't play. I didn't like any of that, but there was some composer that understood the horn very well. And so whenever we got pieces from him, I really loved it because we had fun parts instead of just playing with the saxophones we were playing, which you can't really do on a horn. Separate Ways, I think I liked that one. I think it was our second year when we started. We played these really beautiful pieces. El Toro with Jeremy in the bull costume. That whole show I thought was really nice. There were some really great, awesome solos too that Sean Nadeau and Rick Morat played. I actually really loved it because they were such phenomenal players. So anytime they had a solo, I didn't mind because I liked listening to them play. There was that flute solo that I really liked. Yeah, I liked the pieces that had good parts for the middle voices, which are few and far between, actually. Not the armed forces. Guys, we played so many pieces with the basketball band that it's actually difficult to remember what you played on the field and what you played in the basketball and what you played in both. And I'd say that even now, there's some songs that we played in either band and I maybe didn't fully recognize their equivalents on the radio. And so even to this day, I'll be listening to the radio and hear something and start humming my part and have no idea whether it was a clarinet part, a saxophone part, a horn part, if I played it in high school, in marching band, if I just heard the band play it, if I heard it on a CD, you know. I definitely remember there were times when, you know, people wouldn't get their drill right and you'd come very close to you. No, don't do that. I remember, I actually really liked the pregame show, as silly as that sounds. I liked making the rotunda and all the iconic things, UVA symbols. I hated the high stepping. There was one year I was next to Jimmy Royston, and we literally had 2 counts and like 8 feet to go. So we just went all out of step and just sprinted to our spots, and since it was only 2 counts, no one really noticed. I think there was a lot, I think the flag, the color guard were coming out in front of us too, so you couldn't really tell, but I remember we racked our brains for a long time on how that was mathematically possible. That being said, I really like the new pregame. I saw it at the 2013 Oregon-Virginia game, and I really enjoyed it. That was probably the highlight of that experience. I liked it whenever we did something that I could still perform and do the drill, or do the visual. Didn't like it when the visual got in the way of the music. Like when performers would be playing their highest notes and have to like do a shuffle or something. It's very hard to do. I liked any time we used our capes because I thought that was a really great graphic visual to move around. I liked the spinning when we would spin and turn around so the capes would fly. I remember we did like an air guitar, and that was really lame. It was actually really hard to see what you were doing. You just looked really silly. I think some of the visuals we did where we would go down and then come up and play right away were actually really stunning in terms of watching the performance. They were really difficult to do, but we got used to it. I guess we used to come out and play that first note that we would play in the pre-game. We would actually come from like a bent over position up and then play. And that's a really great visual, you know, from the perspective of the audience, really tough to do. But then of course when you get it, you're really excited about it. I never liked being anywhere near the drums, the drum line, because they sort of get to do what they need to do to perform, which is unfair, but I understand, because those drums are heavy, because it was always very difficult. You would have to just adapt to whatever they needed you to do. There are worse things in the world, of course. I'm trying to remember other drill sets. I remember doing the 7. We did a giant 7 on the field, and apparently there was some sort of flyover to get an image of it or something. That 7 was really hard to do a continuous diagonal down almost the entire field, and I think I was near the real at the back, so I remember just cringing to see it like line up perfectly, and then it'd be like 1 count, and then of course it went cockeyed again. But we worked really hard on that. I think we actually had enough time to adjust it, because I think Matthew Taskey was right behind me, and of course he was very vocal about fixing the drill. So that was actually a really nice set to do, because you just had these long lines. And you sort of knew who came from high school programs that really cared about drill. Because I came from a very small high school, you know, at most we had 40 people in our band, all 5 or 6 years that I was in the band. And so we had to really care about things like that, but if you came from a school that had 200-300, wasn't as big of a deal if you were a little off here or there. So that was a fun set. I feel like Mr. Cook has put in a lot of more interesting sets lately, like doing the stick figures that play ball. I love the opening set that they do now with the V and crossovers, but we didn't used to do things like that as much. They were more abstract. We didn't have nearly as many people, so it was really hard to do something graphic like that. When they spelled out Virginia for the first time, I was doing photography for that, so I was up in the upper deck, the last seat, and got to take pictures of that. That was actually really stunning when you got enough people to spell the name of your school. I liked the rotunda set as well, although I think from the back side of the rotunda, you can't really tell what it is. That was a fun set. Certainly anytime the student body felt good enough about a victory that they would storm the field, that was a pretty good moment. In terms of the overall football feeling, we never could actually storm the field. And then, so as band members, we were always performing, and then when I was volunteering, I was always protecting equipment from the field rushers. So I've never actually been able to rush the field, but it definitely feels really great when when the community gets that engaged engaged that they rushed the field. Winning the Music City Bowl was really cool because we won the Battle of the Bands the night before by pure showmanship, if I believe. And then to win the game, in something that was surrounded by music, that was a really great moment. I think that was my senior year. Yes, it was my senior year. So it was also a really nice way to leave the band, is having won this game against Minnesota, and having won that game, having won the band battle, and having this really nice New Year's weekend. Myself and Tanya Harrison, we would come to games really early in the morning and help get set up. And we would hang out late after all the band members had gone, and we would clean up after them. And we would then hop on the bus and go to the game. We would hang out after the game, after everyone had left, and we would clean up. And we would go back and we would clean up, and we would be we were literally, besides the band staff, some of the first people there and the last people to leave. And one thing that we always complained about was, in part because everything was sort of chaotic, we had to do a lot of cleaning up, which we didn't quite enjoy so much, but we were there to step it up and do it. I think the level of commitment in that first group, we were all excited and we wanted to be there, but I think the level of sort of self-commitment to the band was very different. People were there to have fun and to perform. Not necessarily to do a lot of the back-end tasks like I was mentioning before. Of course, now there are entire student staffs whose job it is to make sure all these things happen and they happen smoothly. But I would say, some big negative moments would definitely be, getting back at the end of the day, after that very long day, and seeing all the trash that we had to pick up, or realizing that all of these things had to be put away. And that no one was there. There were always other people there, but I think for Tanya and I being there from the beginning to the end, there were other people that were in the same boat. Megan French was our uniform manager for a very long time. Whitney Hassler was there a lot. She was the librarian doing music. Of course, Tiffany Hornberger was always there. She's still one of my favorite people in the entire world. But, you'd look around and it would just be the 4 or the 5 of you, and it was really overwhelming. I'd say towards the end of when I was a 4th year, I think you'd see more people sticking around. And so in terms of when we founded KK Psi, these were the things that I was thinking about, like here's the service that this group can really do. Here's where the student leaders can step up, because, we should all share in it, we should all be responsible for ourselves. We should have people running around making sure everyone puts their helmets away, puts their hats away, do all these little details. And that's where a lot of the leadership positions are now, is doing all those things and keeping all those details straight. But back when there was only a handful of us, it was pretty difficult. Of course, we also got to take home all the leftovers, so that worked out pretty nicely in the end. We also had a horrible, horrible day where we had a lot of the merchandise, and so Tanya and I would actually sell merchandise during the morning. So we didn't get a lot of time to eat or to change or to lay low. We were always interacting with people, usually with parents, which was great because we both had pretty positive attitudes and we're getting across to the parents all these things that the band were doing. But a lot of times we had this really ratty old box that we would leave all the merchandise in because we figured everyone would leave alone an old ratty box. We sort of push it off to the side. And one day, we don't really know why, but some sort of truck had been backed into this huge building. It's called the Cage in University Hall. Had backed in and had actually backed over our box of merchandise and broke all of the year 1 CDs. So that was pretty devastating. However, we did get a couple of free CDs out of it because I didn't know what to do with the CDs that survived but didn't have a case or a booklet. But sometimes there were little setbacks like that. There were also a lot of things just being around that much that you started to realize, like how much Tiffany was doing on the fly. I also was like acutely aware of all the small problems, like, oh, this space wasn't reserved for the whole day. Oh, the laundry is 2 days late getting back, so they haven't sorted it. And so, you know, Tanya and I being there, we were helping with a lot of those problems on the fly. And I think later more people conglomerated and were sort of there early and there late to handle a lot of these issues. And then the more the band has been able to organize and to focus less on these types of things, the better it's gotten. It seems now, like having followed the band all day around, things are a lot smoother. Certainly having their own space helps a lot, because before we were reserving the cage, and sometimes there were rowers or swimmers doing their practices or rehearsals there. We also had the most awkward rooms that used to be, I think, for rowing. They would fill them with water so that they could row. Of course, they have machines now that give that resistance, but that was our uniform room, and it was incredibly bizarre. Really tall ceilings, very long and narrow, and we actually had to have ramps to push the uniform carts out of the room. So, and the hat boxes would be stacked up, 5, 6 feet. So if they weren't stacked properly, they would all come down and have to stack them again. So it wasn't ideal for a long time, and we sort of retrofit to that. The instrument room was pretty terrible. It was hard to get in there. It was hard to get out of there. I left a lot of textbooks there and then didn't have them all weekend and had to come back later. It was also just not in a great place in terms of being on grounds to sort of stop by or to go over. It was over in U Hall, and you could walk it if you wanted to, or you take a bus, and it was quite a long bus ride. So it wasn't like you could sort of stop in between classes to check in, pick up your music if you missed it. It was quite an ordeal, a big time commitment to get there. Now that the band's on central grounds, I think it's much easier to, it's still on the fringe, on the outside of grounds, but still, if you just had to run over there quickly, it wouldn't be the end of the world, whereas I think going to U Hall is kind of the end of the world. And also the band's office itself moved around a lot, and it was very distant from its facilities, from where it stored the instruments and the uniforms and all that kind of stuff. So having that brand new fancy space solved a lot of the problems that we had to deal with those early years. You come in to work on the uniforms and no one had a key, so you had to run across the building and get the key, and then you come back and someone had wandered off. And, it was all that kind of chaos. So a lot of the professors in the astronomy department think I'm sort of like a Girl Scout, because I've been trained, I think the band did it, I've just been trained to think every detail through, make sure I have keys, make sure I have extra paper, make sure I have an extra Gatorade, all of those little things, because of all the worst case scenarios that happen when you have 300 people to organize. I also don't find organizing things to be that challenging. 300 people, you got over it, you got used to it, you did it. Getting them all through the line for food and to throw their trash away was hard. I doubt they still do that. It's probably still a challenge, but those are the things that we were that in my group, we were sort of worried about. It was all these little details that we were trying to clean up to make the day a wonderful experience for the parents and for the students. And like I said, now all those things happen organically, and that's sort of what's really wonderful when you look back at the band, is that all these things that you sweated over, that were the little stresses in your life, that were the horrible things that you had to come back to, now just fix themselves. And I think, in terms of being a leader, that's what you want to see. And so today, the band leadership, like I said, are focused on a whole other set of problems, and that's wonderful, and that's where we wanted to be. The night we played with the Temptations, it was our first Thursday night game. We always, after games, when we cleaned up and everything, we went for IHOP, because that's all we could afford. And I remember we went, and I had 2 midterms the next day. It was like 11:30. I could not get any of my professors to give me a break on these midterms. And I explained, I think today, if you explain you're in the marching band and there was a Thursday game, they'd give you a break, but they didn't that first year. And I locked my keys in my car, because I was all over the place. And my parents had visited, it was a crazy day. And so Justin, Starr, Tanya, Harrison, and I stood in an IHOP parking lot until about 5 in the morning, waiting to get the keys out of my car. So there was a sacrifice. I did not do well on those exams, because I had to take Justin to the airport almost immediately thereafter, because his wallet was in my car, so he couldn't go to the airport. And then I went directly into my exams with no sleep. It ended up being fine in the long run, but not a fun day. That was the worst day of my life. There were some heated moments between myself and the band office, because I was pretty headstrong about my career in astronomy, obviously, and my academic life. When I was looking to apply to graduate school in the fall, so that happens in the fall, and I had to take my physics GRE, which is the most heinous test on earth. I can't stand it when people complain about the LSATs or something when they haven't done the physics GRE. Like, you literally spend months preparing for the physics GRE. So I actually really strongly considered quitting my 4th year, because I just didn't think I could balance it all. And I actually went to Mr. Pease's office and told him, and, you know, burst into tears, because it was a really difficult decision to make. You know, I had, you know, my grades were always worse in the fall, and I was under so much stress, and I was having trouble with asthma. So I actually broke down in his office in the spring, and we actually worked it out. You know, I had a reduced sort of leadership load. So I decided to do it, and I'm really glad I did, because that was a great year. Like I said, he made some allowances for me to miss. I already knew I was going to miss 4 weeks of school, and I was taking pretty much a graduate course load. So I was a little nervous about that. But we worked it all out, and I was glad I was there in the end. I think a couple people knew about that, but it was very emotional. Very emotional decision. And it all worked out fine. I got into graduate school. GREs were a little bit rough, but, you know, it didn't end up mattering, because I'd done so much research. All my trips were great. I went to Australia twice that fall. Went to the observatories a couple times. It all worked out. And I mean, it's probably worth mentioning that band does not show up on my resume at all. It doesn't show up on my CV. It never did. It didn't show up on my graduate school transcripts. It's something that I did and that I love to do, that, you know, I got no professional benefit from, I guess, to put it in that way. You know, my graduate schools in astronomy don't care if you were in the marching band, and that's why you got a B-. And I think that was a conflict that it was hard. I think that was the root of a lot of our conflict, is that a lot, you know, the hard hours that I put in and all the effort was not something that I'm getting paid back for. Whereas I feel like there's a general assumption that if you're in a leadership role in the band, you're putting that on your resume and someone cares. Well, that's not the case for me in academia. You know, it's not even appropriate to put any of that stuff on there. So the only way my grad schools, and then later in life, the only way someone would know that I was in the marching band is from my transcript. That's why I always signed up for course credit, because I wanted that. That was the only way to communicate that on an application. You know, I've actually met a couple of astronomers who are in KK Psi, so that's been really cool. But yeah, so you know, and that is an important distinction. I think a lot of people got recommendation letters from Mr. Pease, but for me, you know, no one would have read the letter if it wasn't coming from someone in my discipline. So, like I said, I think that's always been a disconnect, is that I'm doing, you know, I have always done what I've done for the band for the pure sake of wanting to do it and wanting to make it better, and wanting to keep this family that I've really loved and enjoyed alive. And, you know, when I did the photography, it was entirely to showcase the hard work of these individuals, their performance. I love showing how happy they are when they perform. I like showing their cohesion, you know, when they're in the stands, how they're laughing and joking together. And I think if you look through the pictures that I've taken, it tells this story. It tells, you know, very much the story of you know, the hard work and the focus and the dedication, but also the fun and the laughter that you get from the students. And I guess that is something important to say, is that there's no mention of the band on my resume. or anywhere. And it's not something that I choose, that's just the nature of where I work. The leadership activities where they've helped me sort of personally, they've helped me develop skills maybe, they've helped me develop confidence and those types of things, but you know, they don't give me any credit going forward. Which is you know, something about academia that I don't really like, but it's always something that I think is really difficult for people to see. So I have a corner devoted to marching men at my house with my framed senior portrait, or the portrait of the whole band that you get when you graduate. I have a couple pictures of KK Psi from different things. I have the star plaque that was named after me. That's actually in my office, that's not at home. I have this little corner devoted to band, and it's sort of a side note in my life, which is just a weird perspective to look back on because it was so huge when I was an undergrad. It's probably the defining characteristic of my undergraduate career.